and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 462, and today's date is September 8th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Obama Planning for a Western-Backed Coalition No-Fly Zone over Syria. Now we can see what is going on here. We understand that the Islamic State is controlled by the United States, Israel, UK, and other Arab nations. They've been funneling weapons into them, supporting them, and the Islamic State is doing everything the United States couldn't do. They're able to infiltrate anywhere they want. They can push the terrorist group into any area. And basically all this is a rebranding of the Free Syrian Army, a rebranding of Al-Qaeda. They created something new, and they supplied them with weapons, and it is like they are using the paid mercenary forces within this group to infiltrate any country they want. They can do anything they want with it, and it looks like it has nothing to do with the United States. It is a plan which has been put forth to start and get into Syria, then eventually move into Libya, Lebanon, Yemen, and take over the entire region because they are losing control in the region. The tribes are rising up, and it's getting more and more difficult as time goes on, and they are running out of time because as these countries continually fall, they're going to kick out the central banks. They're going to sell their oil not using the US dollar, and this is going to be a very, very big problem for the central bankers, because what's going to happen then, other countries are going to look at this and say, okay, if I can buy all this oil from these countries without using the US dollar, why do I have to hold it? I'll get rid of it. I'll, get gold, I'll get yuan, I'll get rubles, I'll get whatever other currency that's out there that they'll take, and I'll just use that. All those dollars will then come back to the United States. We will see the devaluing of the dollar. We will see prices start to rise on different products, and we will see inflation. And they, right now, the central bankers, the United States government, are doing everything they possibly can to provoke any country they possibly can to start this war, and they're putting everything forth to get ready to go into Syria. You can just see how they're planning, plotting, and getting ready to go in there, because their goal has always been the same, and it seems like they are sticking to the plan, and they're not going to be swayed either way. They're going straight for it. They don't care if Russia's on the other side. They've been demonizing Russia. If this turns out to be an all-out war, so be it to them. They really don't care. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, what we see here in Japan, it looks like their economy has contracted by 7.1% in the second quarter. This is the world's third largest economy, and it contracted at an annualized rate of about 7.1%. And we can see they thought it was going to be about 6.8%, but it was a lot worse than they thought. And it seems like a lot of countries are starting to feel the economic pressures where their economies aren't doing as well as everybody thought they were going to be doing. Because you have to remember, if we go back 1 year now, the European nations, Japan, everyone said we're going to see recovery, we're going to see jobs, we're going to see fantastic things happening as we go into 2014, and it is completely the opposite. Now, it looks like France, they pretty much had it with their president. About 85% of the population does not want the president to seek a second term in 2017. His approval rating has hit an all-time low, with just 13% of those as saying he is doing a good job. Now, of course, you have to remember, back when we had the false flag event in August of 2013, the president of France was out there, the Eurozone was out there, and the U.S. was all hyping up recovery. We're in recovery. Look, everything's going well. And again, the French people pretty much had it with the lies, telling them how great everything, and basically what's happening is the entire system is really starting to fall apart, and it's not exactly what the leaders are telling us. And like I said, it is always the opposite of what they tell us. If they tell you we're in a recovery, think collapse. Now we can see that Argentina now, where they were going into default, and I said this in my past reports, that they might be looking at the BRIC nations and they don't really care that much about, owing money to the U.S. They don't care about what the judge says in the U.S., and it's starting really to look that way, where China and Argentina, their central banks have agreed to a multi-billion-dollar currency swap operation to bolster Argentina's foreign reserves or pay for Chinese imports with yuan as Argentina's U.S. reserves dwindle. In addition, Argentina claims China supports the nation's plan in the defaulted bondholder dispute. The swap will allow Argentina to bolster its foreign reserves or pay for Chinese imports with the yuan currency at a time where weak export revenues and an alien currency have put the Latin American nation's foreign reserves under intense pressure. So we can see they are stepping away from the Western central banking system, moving over to the BRIC nations. China is helping them. They're creating this bilateral deal, and it's exactly what we thought it was going to be when we reported on Argentina defaulting. Now, I talk a lot about the housing recovery, and it's starting to look like this housing recovery is really starting to fall apart. I looked around the country today on Zillow, match it up to Realtor.com, and I am seeing homes on the market much, much longer. Actually, I'm noticing a lot of people are starting to lower their house prices because they're getting worried now. We're coming towards the end of the summer. We're in September already, and they're seeing no one is biting, so they're starting to lower their prices. Even Fannie Mae just reported the number of Americans who said now is a good time to buy a home plunged by 64%, the lowest in survey history. Americans' attitudes toward the housing market continue to soften in August and suggest that housing activity may resume its modest recovery in 2015 after some pullback this year. This is what Fannie Mae is saying. They're saying we're going to have a little bit of a pullback in 2014, but 2015 looks really, really great. No, it doesn't. It's going to get worse. People are getting laid off. People are underemployed. This cannot bounce back. Mortgage companies are laying off people left and right. So whatever they're saying, they're just putting it off, letting you know this is a pullback and we're going to see better days ahead of us. Now, we have to ask ourselves a couple of questions here. Why are mortgage applications to purchase a home down 12% versus 1 year ago? Well, let's see. The unemployment rate is down a full percentage point. Why aren't people going out to purchase these homes? Why are they lower than they were in 2010 at the recession lows? Doesn't make any sense. Why are they at 1997 levels when well before the housing boom took hold? How could home prices rise by 25% since 2012 even though mortgage applications have plunged? I mean, we know this because we know the Fed, we know foreign investors are coming in and paying for cash. The American person is completely out of the real estate market. They have no money. They're not taking out mortgages, and this is why mortgage companies have been laying off people. How could mortgage applications be 65% below 2007 levels when mortgage rates were at 6.7%? Think about this. We're down around 4.25%, somewhere around that area, and right now mortgage applications are continually plunging. It makes no sense. There were 272 million Americans living in 101 million households in 1997. Today, there are 320 million Americans living in 122 million households. But mortgage applications to buy a house are the same level as 1997. And this is what is being touted as a housing recovery. How could this be possible? You're trying to tell me that every American now just came up with all this cash and they're able to pump it into the housing market and buy their home mortgage-free? It's ridiculous. Now, let's not forget about the illusionary numbers that they keep feeding us, like GDP, inflation, unemployment. They're trying to tell us that retail is doing fantastic, and what we see is retail stores closing, laying off people. We see major corporations laying off people. We are not in a recovery at all. We are in a major, major collapse. The stock market goes up. The gold is suppressed down. This is to keep the illusion alive. And again, when this stock market comes down, it will be the last indicator to let everyone know that yes, the collapse is here, because we've been going through it all along. It has been ongoing. It's almost like 2007, 2008. During that year, the Fed was out there saying they're not forecasting recovery. The corporate media was out there saying that real estate's going to be bouncing back, that everything is fine, and people and corporations were laying off people left and right, and then all of a sudden we had the market crash, and they had to say, yeah, okay, we admit it, we're in an economic collapse. And the same thing is happening now, but it's going to be much, much worse. Now, the IMF chief is out there, Christine Lagarde, head of the International Monetary Fund, has urged Germany to increase spending to spur the Eurozone's troubling economy. And what they're seeing right now is Eurozone is completely heading towards a depression. A lot of the countries are already in a depression. A lot of the countries are in a recession, heading that way, and they don't really have any options here and how to save this. And of course they have to go to spending, loaning more money, because there's no way out of this problem except with some type of an event and then eventually war. Now it looks like it's starting to seem like every single country is getting ready for some type of riot or civil disobedience or civil unrest. And we know that London has purchased water cannons. We understand the Eurozone has the European police, which can be dispatched to any country that can't handle the situation. We understand the United States has DHS implemented. We see the militarization of the police force. And now Spain, they're preparing for an autumn of discontent by buying $1 billion worth, 1 billion euros worth of riot gear. The Spanish government is readying itself for an autumn of discontent, spending nearly 1 billion euros on riot gear for police units as protest groups prepare for a string of demonstrations during this fall. The ministry also finalized its purchase of a new truck-mounted water cannon on anti-riot measures. So they're preparing for something very, very big. And of course they're saying, oh yeah, we have some upcoming protests, and this is their first response: riot gear and water cannons. It makes no sense. I mean, if you're going to have a peaceful protest, why do you need any of this stuff? They're getting ready for the collapse of the entire system. That's what they're getting ready for, because they realize when everyone says, wait a minute, where'd my money go? The money's worth absolutely nothing. I should say the currency. The currency is worth absolutely nothing. This is what they're afraid of. This is what they're trying to control. And you can see that every country, I should say every private Western central bank country, is getting ready in some way for this civil unrest. Now, Cameron is trying everything he possibly can to stop Scottish independence, and he's even using the Islamic terror to saying if Scotland actually votes itself away and it becomes independent, they're saying that they might see a wave of terror from ISIS. I mean, this is how desperate, and how does he know that they'll see waves of terror? Does he somehow control the Islamic State with the US and Israel, and he might sick them on these Scottish people? Yeah, who knows? Okay, now let's move on to Ebola. Sierra Leone is asking for international help. Sierra Leone has appealed to the international community to provide more funds and care workers to help in the fight against the spread of Ebola. The country says it will impose a nationwide 4-day lockdown from 18th of September through the 21st of September in a bid to halt the spread of the deadly virus, which has now killed over about 2,000 people. And it's strange, the World Health Organization is saying, no, don't do this, let's leave everything open. And I said this in the past, where the United States might be using this Ebola outbreak as a way to bring in U.S. military to this area, because wherever the outbreak is, this is where massive amount of oil discovery has been done, has been researched, and it's in each one of these countries. And it seems like they're using this manufactured Ebola outbreak to weed out the people, to have the countries beg for help. And it seems like Obama's sitting back saying, no, it's nothing to worry about. Let it spread. It's fine. We can weed out as many people as we possibly can. We're just waiting for you to ask for some help. And of course, they might even, as we can see, there's reports of Ebola coming into the United States. This is to get the people scared and say, oh, well, we better do something in the West African nations before it comes to the United States. And we can see right now that the United States needs to do more to help control West Africa's deadly Ebola outbreak, to stop it becoming a global crisis that could one day threaten Americans. And this is coming from President Obama during an interview. If we don't make that effort now, and this spreads not just through Africa but other parts of the world, there is the prospect that the virus mutates, it becomes more easily transmittable. So after Obama said there's nothing to worry about, that, he doesn't really want to do anything down there, is now coming up saying, we need to do more, we better do something before it spreads to the U.S. And instead of sending more medical personnel and helping the medical community contain it, it seems like they want to send the U.S. military down to this area. U.S. military will begin aiding what has been a chaotic and ineffective response to the Ebola epidemic in West Africa, arguing that it represents a serious national security concern. And like I said, the playbook is always the same. They're trying to get the U.S. troops into these areas because this is where China is. And right now the economies of all these Western African nations is really hurting because businessmen are fleeing. They don't want to be there. And it's hurting the Chinese-Western African relationship because they've been pumping in billions into their infrastructure. And we can see they've been using the same playbook in Nigeria, Sudan, Mali, where they're using terror to bring in the troops. And it wasn't working in this area. So it looks like they switched it up and they're having this Ebola breakout. And of course now they're sending U.S. military into this region. And now they got the troops into this region, and you can see they are definitely pushing the agenda. And again, that doesn't mean that this isn't real and it is spreading, and because what we're seeing now is that more and more people are getting infected. Some people don't even get infected, and some people do. But it looks like since the borders are all open and we're flying people into the States, they want to really use the fear factor to say, you know what, we better send military down there, we better help out, we better do something. And it seems like it's playing right into this, and this is exactly what they're doing. And it seems like they're going to take control of each one of these countries. As we know, they're helping with the border security in Nigeria, where they're not helping with any border security in the U.S., which makes absolutely no sense. But they're very concerned about border security in another nation. But this is all to keep it contained, not Ebola, but to keep the nations contained, have the military presence there, and they're already there, and it's much harder to get them out once they're inside the country. And of course, as we know, China is in each one of these countries, Russia is in each one of these countries, and now the U.S. figured out a way of getting into this area. Now, it looks like in Japan they're having problems moving that U.S. base to another area because it will allow them to bring in more sophisticated weapons into this area. And it looks like the Japanese people are saying, you know what, we don't want this base here. We don't see a reason for it. So it seems like there's a little bit of a setback right now in trying to bring this base online and get it established in Japan. Now, the OSCE is guaranteeing the experts from Malaysia safe passage to the MH17 crash site. Since there is a so-called ceasefire, they're allowing them in. They're going to protect them, make sure they're protected from any outside forces, and they're going to let them inspect the area. And we'll have to see how well this goes, if they're actually able to do anything in this area. Now, it looks like the Russian sanctions on the import of food is starting to hurt many different countries right now. Russia's ban on most agricultural imports is having a knock-on effect across Europe, Hungary's cheap Polish apples are flooding the market after Moscow introduced these sanctions. A Hungarian apple producer says the situation could force vulnerable farmers to the wall. Those people who haven't put aside anything, he means prepared, have money, have extra food, extra water, saying that they may be in for some very, very hard times or might even take them out of business. And we're seeing this throughout many, many different countries, and we see the farmers are really pissed off at the governments for imposing these sanctions. So what does Europe decide to do? Well, they decide that since there is a ceasefire, let's create more sanctions on Russia, and they're going to go after Rosneft, Gazprom, Neft, Transneft, and they're going to impose sanctions on all of these gas companies. And we can see that they're pushing this forward, even though there's a ceasefire and the people of their country are saying, you know what, we're not really into this because it's hurting us more than it's hurting Russia right now. And of course, the EU adopts the new sanctions. There were a couple countries that were saying, no, I don't know if we want to be involved, but it looks like they all got together and agreed, but they're going to put it off for a couple of days right now to see if the ceasefire continually stays this way, where they're not fighting and there's peace. And if the ceasefire seems not to work, they're going to impose the sanctions. And you have to remember, Russia already has sanctions to counter what Europe and the US is going to do. And again, they might put a block on allowing planes to fly over Russia. They might put a block on industrial imports like automobiles, and this would hurt the nations, the European nations and the US nation, quite a bit. Now, it looks like Kiev is refusing to coordinate routes for humanitarian convoys to the Donetsk and Lugansk area. The Donetsk people are saying that they've created these humanitarian corridors. They want Kiev to help coordinate the humanitarian aid, and they're saying they're getting absolutely no cooperation whatsoever. Now, the U.S. is out there, and they're saying that we are not giving any type of military assistance to Ukraine. The United States has not made any offers on military assistance to Ukraine's government. No U.S. offer of lethal assistance has been made to Ukraine. Now, of course, President Poroshenko is out there, and he's saying Ukraine agrees direct arms deliveries from NATO countries. Ukraine President Petro Poroshenko has agreed to direct deliveries of modern weaponry from several NATO countries, as this is coming from a statement on his website. Agreements with a number of NATO countries have been reached, ensuring direct supplies of modern weaponry. So we're seeing a little bit of a conflict of who's saying what here. There's no one really in agreement. And of course, as we know, Ukraine is continually building up its forces. It is getting weapons from NATO. It is getting weapons from the U.S. The U.S. has a very big stake in Ukraine. They paid about $5 billion to have this coup inside Ukraine. We know that Biden and Kerry has put their family and friends on the board of directors of the oil companies and natural gas companies, and we can see that the U.S. and EU bought out the pipeline. So they have a huge amount of money and time invested in this coup, and believe me, they're going to protect it, and they're going to give military assets. Now, Ukraine forces are rotating now. They are building up during this ceasefire lull. Ukrainian Security and Defense Council official admitted that new troops and equipment arrived to the zone of the military operation while a ceasefire was declared. Ukraine has enough forces to repulse enemy attacks now. Forces and equipment that arrived to the zone of combat operations are being prepared, and we can see that they are using this time to establish their troops, bring in more aid, military assets, and I don't think this ceasefire is going to last much longer. Poroshenko has put Mariupol defenses on high alert. Ukrainian President Poroshenko said Monday he had ordered troops in southeastern city of Mariupol to ensure proper defenses of Kiev's key stronghold in southeastern Ukraine. And we can see right now that all of this, with all these new weapons coming in, the troops being reinforced, this is not an action of peace and ceasefire. This is an action of let's use this as an opportunity to build our forces so we can have some type of an event where we can blame it on Russia and we can call off the ceasefire. Now, during this ceasefire, during this peacetime, we see that Ukraine and US decide to launch a maritime exercise in the Black Sea. Now, why in the world would they do this at this point in time? Ukrainian and American naval forces are taking part in joint maritime drills dubbed Sea Breeze 2014, which began on Monday and is going to end on September 10th. The objective of the exercise is an international operation on establishing and securing a maritime safety zone in the crisis area. Now, it's a very strange period of time to have this when there is a ceasefire going on, because something could happen. It could be blamed on Russia, and we really are going to need to watch this situation very, very close. Now, Lebanon is calling out for more arms. They're saying the tribes are really gaining ground here, and they're saying they need more weapons from the U.S., and it looks like they are getting them. The Beirut government said the United States shipped weapons and ammunition to the Lebanese army on September 6th. This new batch is part of the U.S. assistance program to the Lebanese army, and they're going to continually send weapons in, and it looks like they're getting anti-tank guided missiles, mortars, rocket-propelled grenade launchers to help fight against the tribes of Lebanon. Libya has already fallen, so they're not sending anything to the government there because it just doesn't exist anymore. A new government is being formed in Libya. Yemen is still receiving weapons from the U.S. government because the tribes there are rising up and pushing the government. They want the government to resign. And we can see all of this is really starting to ramp up, and the United States central bankers are starting to lose control in this area. Now, we understand that the Islamic State is controlled by the United States, and of course, to help with the problem, the United States decided to come out with its own anti-ISIS propaganda video. But if you really look at the video, it really doesn't give you that feeling of, hey, don't join them. To me, when I watched it, it felt like, hey, look what you can do. You can kill people, you can hang people, and why don't you join? I mean, it seems like it's the opposite here. Of trying people not to join. And why would they put out a anti-ISIS propaganda video? I mean, they're making it seem like there's television commercials all across the United States where the Islamic State is advertising for people to come down to Syria, to Iraq, join up, and have some killing fun there. I mean, this is what they're trying to convince everyone with, and then they come out with a propaganda video. Basically what they're doing is they're pushing their agenda to make you afraid of the Islamic State. They wanted to show you these images. They wanted to show you what they're capable of. They're pushing the fear factor, making you afraid. That's what they're trying to do. Now, Iran is out there, and they're accusing the United States of helping the Islamic State in many different ways. They're saying Iran accused the United States Sunday of not taking the threat from Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria seriously, and charged that the U.S. aid had previously helped the jihadists. They have helped the Islamic State in Syria in different ways, alluding that they supported the Islamic State, and they provided the group with weapons and other type of aid, just like they did with the Free Syrian Army, where they were fighting against Assad. And of course, for many, many years, the United States said, no, this is a natural uprising there. We're not sending any type of weapons there. We're not giving them any type of aid. And of course, when the alternative media and everyone else came out with it saying, yes, you're giving weapons there, and the whole thing kind of backfired on them, and they finally had to admit, yes, we've been supporting them, we're giving them weapons, but we're only giving it to the moderate people, not the terrorist area. No, they were giving it to everyone. They didn't care who was there, if it was paid mercenaries, one Syrian, and other people from other countries. Of course, Al-Qaeda was created by CIA, so they knew exactly what they were doing. It was done on purpose because they were trying to remove Assad from power. Now, the U.S. and other nations are in talks with Iran for this P5+1 deal, which is absolutely going to go nowhere because eventually they're going to accuse Iran of doing something, and we can see this is already starting. The United States has determined that Iran, despite an international agreement, continues to secretly procure components for its missile and nuclear programs. On August 29th, the administration identified 4 individuals and 2 entities linked to Iran's weapons of mass destruction effort. So this whole thing about peace talks was going absolutely nowhere. It had nothing to do with their nuclear program. They were trying to infiltrate their banking system. They even had the IMF go in and take a look. They wanted to put all the natural resources on the Western banking system, and guess what? It's not working. This is why that deal that Obama had was under lock and key. Only a certain number of people could go in and take a look at it. You had to leave your phone out. You couldn't take pictures. You couldn't make copies. You had to go into a separate room to view it. This is what it's all about, but now it's falling apart, and they're going to bring Iran into it because we know Iran has an agreement with Syria, and eventually, once they get into Syria, Iran will come to the aid of Syria, Russia will come to the aid of Syria, and the United States central bankers can say, great, now we have the chance of going into Iran, we can fight Russia for the world war. This is working out perfectly. We're going to cover up the entire collapse. Now, we know the United States is continually out there saying that there's going to be absolutely no boots on the ground except for paid mercenaries. The United States Army is gauging the interest of mercenaries to join the battle against ISIL militants in a range of capacities and help strengthen the military in Iraq, according to a report. As the White House has ruled out boots on the ground, we're not going to put boots on the ground, and you know it's always the opposite. They're eventually going to put boots on the ground because we're going to have an event. It's going to get worse. They're going to have to bring the boots in. They're going to have to put the draft in full throttle here because we know there's a bill already floating around to implement the draft once again. They are just getting all prepared for what is coming. And right now, the United States is paying paid mercenaries to fight against their paid mercenaries in the Islamic State. So does this make any sense whatsoever? No, it doesn't. What they're really doing is they're using the paid mercenaries as the ground force with the Islamic State and the Free Syrian Army to clear the way as they bomb into Syria to move closer and closer to Assad. And this is exactly what their plan is. And you can see it is ramping up right now. Now, it looks like they're trying to make the connection of Russia and the Islamic State. Now, the first thing they came out with is that the Islamic State has calling on the Chechnya president to rise up, get the Islamic State, get the Islamists in there all riled up and go along with the Islamic State. And of course the president there said, absolutely not, we're not doing this. And you can see right now they're trying to make some type of connection and saying that yes, it will be coming to Russia, and Russia might even be controlling the Islamic State. What they're saying is that the United States and Facebook and Twitter have removed the Islamic State from posting things on social media. Well, that was because it was backfiring and people were looking at their videos and making different type of analysis of it, saying these are fake, and they started to pull it all down. But they're saying that Russia, there's a similar Facebook type of application out there called VK, and it resembles Facebook, and they have about 250 million subscribers there. They're saying that Russian government isn't pulling down the Islamic State accounts. They're leaving them up there, and they're saying, this is very suspicious. Why isn't Russia doing the same thing the United States did, where they had them all being pulled down? And we see right now they're trying to make the connection that Russia might be part of the Islamic State, and this is coming from a CIA and Pentagon consultant. What I think is happening here is that it's not an official policy by Russia, but there are folks in the government who are generally anti-Western giving these guys some tactical assistance, and this is coming from the CIA Pentagon consultant. And they even took it further than that, where they're saying that that I wouldn't I wouldn't completely rule out a Kremlin type of connection with the Islamic State. So they're just putting it out there. They do a little bit at a time, like breadcrumbs, let people pick it up, and you can see they are really pushing the propaganda. Now, there is an analyst out there, and they're saying that the United States is desperate and crumbling. The imperial power that is using terrorist groups like the Islamic State to break up its foreign adversaries, with Russia being the next potential target, is on its way. The U.S. and its regional allies are using the vicious terrorist organization to attack and destroy nations like Iraq, Syria, Russia, and Iran, and take control of Libya, Lebanon, and Yemen. And we can see right now they're trying to push this agenda very, very hard. Now, it looks like there's a new study conducted by the London-based small arms research organization Conflict Armament Research, and they're documenting a couple things, that the Islamic militants who are wreaking havoc on Iraq and Syria are using U.S.-made weapons supplied to them through Saudi channels. And they're saying, according to the investigation, the Islamic State militants have been using significant quantities of arms, including M16 assault rifles, which are marked property of the U.S. government. The weapons were originally given to the so-called moderate anti-people in Syria, the study found, and the report also found that the anti-tank missiles used by the militants against the Arab Syrian army were identical to the M79 rockets transferred by Saudi Arabia to forces operating under the so-called Free Syrian Army umbrella in 2013. Now, we knew about this from the beginning. Going back to 2013 to the beginning of 2014, they were training paid mercenaries on secret bases in Jordan. We know behind closed doors, Congress agreed to ship anti-tank, anti-aircraft weapons down to the bases in Jordan to supply them to the moderates, which we know there's no such thing. And what they really did is they supplied it to the Islamic State. We had that election for Assad in July, and then right after he won by a landslide, the U.S. government central bankers had no other option but to take all those people that were trained in Jordan and now move them down into Iraq to cause chaos and make it seem like the Islamic State is this new terror organization. And you can see they are using weapons from the United States. They were supplied by the United States. They are controlled by the United States. And you can see this was all to get into Syria. Now, Obama is going to push a Syria no-fly zone. Right now, there's a no-fly zone only for American airplanes. They're going to create a no-fly zone with the other nations, with the coalition that they're putting together. And they want all these nations together to say, yes, there is absolutely no planes that are allowed to fly over this area, and this way it will keep all commercial airliners away from this area so they can plan their attack into Syria. This is what they're prepping for, and they're getting ready to do. Diplomatic sources said President Barack Obama has been promoting a plan for a Western-backed coalition to impose a no-fly zone over northern Syria. They said Obama, who rejected a similar proposal in 2013, sent Secretary of State John Kerry and Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel to consult with NATO and Arab allies as part of an effort to stop the Islamic State. Kerry discussed the no-fly zone with his Turkish counterpart. Kerry has already raised the prospect of NATO military intervention in Syria as a means to stop this terrible Islamic State. And this is all cover speak to say, we are going into Syria. Are you with us this time? Now, as we know, the government officials are out there telling us about terror, terror, terror. The Department of Homeland Security is saying there's no terror threat whatsoever. The FBI is saying the same thing. This should make you a little bit worried, because they never report when there's any type of terror coming, because they don't want you to know. And if they do know about it, how come they didn't stop it? So it's better to say, wow, this slipped under our radar. We have no idea that it came. DHS did not report this for the Boston bombing. They had no idea that this was going to happen. And you know, once they say this, you know that terror is going to happen. Now, there are some people saying that there is the terror threat coming on 9/11. And you know, we have to look at the entire situation. They could do this at any time. It could be on 9/11. It could be after 9/11. They could pick a different date. it doesn't really matter. Something is definitely headed our way, and we have to look at all the different indicators. Right now, we understand that the Islamic State conveniently left about 88 pounds of uranium compounds in Mosul in July, perfect for making dirty bombs. UK Prime Minister David Cameron hyped the ISIS terror threat and raised the official threat to severe. And he did this on August 29th of 2014. The level had remained at substantial since the 11th of July of 2011. Cameron is also preparing to bomb Iraq and Syria and needs a good excuse, especially for bombing Syria. The same with the U.S. and the other coalition countries that are all being formed to go into Syria. At the end of March, Obama, Cameron, and Merkel and other leaders took part in a dirty bomb role-playing game at a nuclear terrorism conference. Dirty bomb drills have been reportedly conducted in the U.S. and UK. Dirty bombs are much easier to make or acquire than conventional real nuclear weapons and are therefore far more plausible as a terrorist weapon. And also, from the nuclear material, you can tell where it came from. With a bioterror, you don't know where it came from. So it's most likely that they might use some type of dirty bomb, and they can look at the isotopes and say, yes, we found it. It came from the Islamic terrorists, and these came from Iran, and they can pinpoint this over to that area. So you can see they are definitely prepping for something like this to happen. And we already know they're implicating Russia as using cyber attacks against the power grid and the financial institutions. We also know that they've been saying that the Islamic State has already been reported that they're inside the United States and they could take out the power grid with a physical attack on it. So we can see all of this is starting to come together right now. We are heading down into September, then going into October, where Obama has his 60 days because he reported to Congress that he did bomb inside of Iraq, and according to the Wars Power Act, he has 60 days right now, and we can see that this will be coming to an end right in the beginning of November. He put off his amnesty executive order to after the elections because the American people are not really into that, even though he keeps saying they are. It's really the corporations and the central bankers that want this, and they realize if he puts that forward, they would have problems during the election time. So you can see how all this is starting to really ramp up as we head towards the fall. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.